Hello and welcome back. Following on from our introduction to Motorola STS 21.60, we'll be going through a few of the utilities that are available in STS, particularly from the system root, beginning with diagram view, which is what you see now. This is diagram view. So clicking on this is what we get here. Next, we've got our table view, and that just basically presents the information or in a tabular view here. To go back to diagram view, just a matter of clicking back to diagram view. Next is new area. Click on new area, and these crosshairs appear. This crosshair appears. Click anywhere here in system root, and create a new area. We'll call it odd. Okay, and what the new area feature enables you to do is to segregate RTUs based on configuration types or whatever's, you might have an RTU that's got a specific configuration or a application, or the RTUs do performing a particular function. Well, you can group them together in this area. So for example, let's take site 3 and we move him to odd. So it's just a matter of right clicking on the site, move to area, we'll call it odd. Okay, same with number 5, site 5, right click, move to area, odd. There you go. It lives in, and they now reside within that area. And like I said, they reside in that area because they have a specific feature that sets them apart from the rest of the RTUs. So we'll put them in there. And then again, you can create another area just by a matter of clicking on new area, clicking anywhere in system root, or even within, just here, I suppose, and we'll call it even. And OK, and we'll move site 4 into that area, and we can even move this into the odd area. So now it resides in here. Again, these are RTUs. We're grouping them because they have a specific setting or feature or something like that. That's why we create these areas. We can double click there, and there's our site 4. Up area just basically takes you back. So we're going from even, we're currently in the even area, we're in the odd area, and now we're back to system root. Okay, next we have our links. Click on links, and it shows or allows us to display the available links. So here you can say we've got RS-Link 2 and RS-Link 3. If you uncheck all, the links disappear from the diagram view and from the table view, but they don't disappear from the network table. They are part of the network table. Okay, to re-enable that, we basically just click on links again, check all, and there it is, and they reappear. You can do an at a glance for each link. So if you right click on the link name, so here we got RS-Link 3, right click, RS-Link 3 information, there it is. So RS-Link 3 is common to site 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. It's all 115, 200 RTU to RTU, RS-232 connection types. Okay, we can then click on RS-Link 2. Again, right click, RS-Link 2 information, and there it is. And that's data speed 9600 RTU to RTU connection type. Okay, so all of what you're seeing here, all of what I've demonstrated here, don't affect the RTU configuration. We haven't changed anything in the RTU configuration. Next feature we can look at here, if we right click anywhere in system root, and we can go field view. Now H3600 CPUs support a feature called field view, and what it allows you to do is upload the site, but just to view it. That's all, nothing else. And here we go. So we've got the site connected, and we've done a field view on it, or we've performed a field view, and we can see a general tab, product types, unit type, firmware version, system address, site ID, physical ports, that sort of information. The available ports on the unit, what's configured on it. So plugin 1 is not used, serial 1 is used or assigned as a 485, a third-party protocol to slave connection. Serial interface 2 is an RS-Link 3 RTU to RTU. Ethernet 1 and plugin 2 aren't configured and are not there. That's the ports tab. Next we have our I/O, and it allows us to view any configured I/O on board, or any I/O that's been configured for that site, which in this instance there are none. Frames, well, it's the default frame, the main frame. That's all that's associated with this site. So physically there's only one frame, that's the main frame. And then we have our files, the available files. Well, what files are in the RTU? So we have our lab application, which is our MOSCAD master, Modbus master, our PLC 1 to slave file, a site configuration, and a site source, which we'll get into that in a moment, and our predefined I/O module values, which I think are, excuse me. So the field view displays the available files that are in the RTU. So again, just to go over it again, field view allows us to connect to a remote RTU or a local RTU and view the site only, not actually upload it, just view it. So again, we begin with the general tab, in the product type, unit type, site ID, firmware, physical ports, and then ports. We can see the ports that are configured or are available on the CPU. Next, I/O, what I/O are configured. Then when I talk about I/O, we're talking about physical I/O modules like mixed I/Os, digital output cards, digital input cards, and the like. Frame refers to the main frame, so the frame that the device is actually fitted to. That's the main frame 0, and then in the event that if there's an expansion option fitted, it would list the number of expansions that are being fitted to the site. Next, we have files, and those files include our ladder application for our Modbus master, a PLC 1 to slave file for Modbus, a site configuration file, our predefined I/O module values. So again, those I/O values could be specific filtering settings and things like that. In this instance, because there are no I/O, there's no I/O actually defined, these I/O settings could be to do with the CPU, and we'll show you where those settings might be. And of course the site source, and that site source is made up of the files that we downloaded. So when we select the site source option, when we download, it zips up all the files except for the remote firmware, or it doesn't zip up the firmware of course, and downloads the files associated with the site, and there's a copy of those files stored on local RTU, which is handy too. Okay, and that's okay there. So now we'll go to our site view, and site view is basically this: just right click on the site and go view, and here it is. It opens these tabs up. So we're going to have general, ports, I/O, and advanced. So general, as you can see, well, I think we've been here before. It basically just shows site ID, site name, description. That's optional. Site name is optional, of course. Site type, so CPU type, you can have 3610, 3640, or 3680. We'll just leave it at 3640 for now. An application associated with it. So the last modified date refers to the date that the application was compiled. That's our compile date and time. Very important when you're trying to manage versions and things like that. We've got the option to add RTU to gallery. Again, that's something we went through earlier, and you could, if there's anything specific or special about this site that you feel that you could apply to other sites, well then just add RTU to gallery. We'll leave that for now. Next we have our ports, our ports tab, and it just gives us an idea of what ports are available or have been configured, and it also gives us the opportunity to do further configuration changes to a port. So for example, if we want to make some changes to serial interface 2, which is our RS-Link 3, RS-232 RTU to RTU, we can go advanced configuration and we can change physical layer and link layer settings here. Again, these are settings that I wouldn't touch or wouldn't modify unless you've actually been told to modify them. Okay, so otherwise they just stay as default. We can also come to our ports tab and define the Ethernet port. We'll set it up for 10100 megabit connectivity. Static LAN, so we'll give it an I/O. We give it an IP address, a fixed IP address, and a link, and all the other information that we need here, like our a default gateway and a subnet mask as well. So that's what the port. So the port tabs basically allows you to define the ports and set up the ports as you need them. Next we have IO tab. Now you'll notice here we've got enable auto IO modules recognition to start. I recommend you leave that unticked, because the minute you tick it, you lose control of being able to modify particular settings, and specifically this setting here, which is the advanced. This under this advanced setting gives you the opportunity to modify or select the AC or the power supply type. So in this instance, we're using an AC power supply with charger. You can see power supply 1 auxiliary 2 voltage is currently off. We can select that to main, or it's actually selectable. So we've got 3.3, 6, 7, 9 volt options, or we have main. Main is usually 13.8 or 14 volts, something like that. But by default, that is off, that setting there. But if you enable that, I'll show what happens. So if you enable auto IO recognition, that gets grayed out. All these things here get grayed out, and you can't really modify. I think you've got to go into the advanced tabs and modify it here. So if we go there, yeah, again, it blanks it out. So it's probably better not to have this enabled. Okay, so just leave that unticked, and it'll allow you to set this up. The idea behind this, so on the power supplies, there are two DC output channels, two DC output channels. We've got an auxiliary 1 2 volt, auxiliary power supply 1, auxiliary 2 voltage. So like I said, by default it's off, but we can select it as main. So we have 14 volt available from that port. I might drop a picture in here just to show what's going on. And here's a diagram just to show, or a picture anyway, showing you what the power supply looks like close up. So here we've got our auxiliary 1A ports on the front of the power supply, auxiliary 1A, auxiliary 1B, and our auxiliary 2A and auxiliary 2B. So power supply 1, auxiliary 2A and 2B. So when we look at the configuration for the power supply, the options are power supply 1, auxiliary 2 voltage. It's user selectable, so we can have 3.3, 6 volt, 7.5, 9 volt, or main. And just getting back to that picture, if you look at main, so the available voltages on power supply 1, auxiliary 1A and 1B is a fixed output, 13.8 volt or thereabouts. It could be 13.9, could be 14 volt, just depends on what your supply is or what the power is at your location. Like I said, the auxiliary 2 power supply 1, auxiliary 2A and auxiliary 2B are user configurable outputs. So you can have 3.3, 5, 7 or 9 volt DC, or you can just select main and have the main output selected, and that'll give you main whatever the 13.8 or 14 volt it is there. Okay, there are LEDs on the front of the device that tell you if power supply 1 auxiliary 2 voltage is configured, and I'll demonstrate those in a moment. I'll show you in a moment. So with the power supply 1 auxiliary 2 voltage in the off state, this is what you'll expect to see. So here the LED on the front of the power supply is not illuminated. As you can see, so we've got our main AC power applied, which is green LED. Auxiliary 1 is up and running, so that's supposed to be orange, but it looks more red, but it's definitely orange, and that's our DC output. And you can see power supply 1 auxiliary 2 voltage output status is off. So that will change once we configure, and I'll show that in a moment. I'll bring up another picture describing that. So in this state, with main power supply 1 auxiliary 2 voltage off, the LED on the front of the power supply is not illuminated, and you can see that there. I'll reconfigure the CPU for it to be main, and we'll have a look at what the LED setting is like. So the change now has been downloaded, has been made and downloaded, and the download is finished successfully. So now, looking at the setup, so we've got main is enabled, and if we look at here, we can see that the LED is now on, showing that we've actually got a voltage available on auxiliary 2. So power supply 1 auxiliary 2, 2A and 2B is now on, so we've got an available voltage there. Keep in mind though, the same voltage whatever you selected back here on this one here. So in the main voltage will appear on auxiliary 2A and 2B. It's not like you can make 2A main and 2B 5 volt or something like that. So 2A and 2B will be the same voltage. Just bear that in mind. Okay, so that's that's how we configure the power supply. There are other settings in here we can look at. We can look at the battery, the power supply 1 battery type connected. So we've got 5 amp hour, 6.5, 10 amp hour, or other. Anything with a greater capacity than 10 amp hour, select other there. So that's, but generally most of the batteries we see usually about 6.5 to 10 amp hour. So that's that setting. The rest just leave as default. The rest of it there. There are different power supply types. Obviously, you can select from with or without charger. With or without charger for DC, so 18 to 72 volt DC with charger, without 12 volt. Low tier is pretty much just 12 volt going into it, no smarts in it at all. 12 volt expansion refers to the power supply that's associated with an expansion rack. And if we look at the picture, we can see here, maybe not this one here, but there is another fitting here just below this digital output port that does our expansion rack. So that's that one there. So under the Advanced tab, if we go under Advanced tab here, which is very different to this Advanced, we click on the Advanced tab, and in here we have a fair amount of settings that we can change. Again, these are settings that I would only recommend modifying if you're asked to modify them. So for example, here we've modified the power supply, and if we double click on that one there, we can see here power supply, and we've set it as main. So we've strayed away from the default setting, and there's that little red triangle that says we've made a change. We've made no change to the mini session, and these changes are made by the firmware. So as with different firmware version releases, quite often you'll get settings that the firmware will change automatically under the Advanced tab. So next we'll look at these other utilities here on top. We'll go back to the General tab. Okay, and we'll look at these other utilities. So date and time, pretty self-explanatory. Select local, get the time, or you can do it remotely. So select your site and the link that site resides on, hit get, it goes out and gets it. More on remote comms and remote setups and that sort of thing in a later video. Logger, again, fairly self-explanatory, but there is a really good STS have a comprehensive, very comprehensive set of manuals here, STS, to complement the error logger. So for example, if we go into diagnostic output and error messages, and we search for a specific error message, let's go, this is quite a common, there we go, error 141. So quite often you'll see this error coming up in CPUs and RTUs. Cannot find link ID and network configuration. This is the manuals associated or that come supplied with STS are really, really comprehensive, and you really should make an effort to consult these before calling for support or making a support email or something like that. The information within these manuals is quite comprehensive and it's really good. As you can see, we've just run the error logger on the local CPU. We can see that it's telling us there's no IP address specified for Ethernet port 1. It's a bit of a warning, but it's not a critical. See, you'll get different types of warnings here. Again, we'll get into those in a later video. But just for information, there's a bit of a warning here. That's a startup information, and this is just another bit of information telling us that the IP port or no IP address has been specified for the IP port. So that's fine. It's just warnings more than anything else. Nothing critical. Next, we've got our diagnostics tab. Again, under diagnostics, we have our device list, and the device list is actually made up of software modules that represent the physical configuration of the CPU. So each one of these units under the in this device list here is a software module, represents a physical configuration on the CPU. So for example, we can go here to the drop down list, and we've got the various ones. So for example, we've got our RS Link 3, which is represented by RTU3. These are the layers: link layer, physical layer. I'm not sure what this, that's the application layer. I'm not sure what this one here is though. That I need to look that up. But if you click on that, let's say we'll click on RTU3L, which is the link layer, and we look at level 11, and this will display the number of transmitted and received frames here. And if there's any retransmitted frames, will also appear there. Again, so diagnostics and the device list. The device list is made up of software modules that represent a physical configuration on the CPU. So like I say, if you've got a port set up for radio, it would show up there. It's been configured there. All these are software modules that represent a physical configuration on the CPU. Okay, not all of them, but most of them would represent a software module that represents a configuration in the CPU. That's them there. Okay, next we have time tag. Don't mess around with that. With nothing set up in there. Again, we could probably look at that in another video. That's our diagnostics, and that's and we almost missed out. Then we've got our download. So from our download screen or dialog box, we select local, and obviously we select the files we want to download to the RTU. So let's just go through what they are. So site configuration, fairly self-explanatory. It's just the site configuration for the site. Our ladder application, of course, is what runs what makes up the application. Our PLC 1 to slave driver for the Modbus port. Now the remote system file refers to the firmware for the RTU. Don't download this. We don't need to. But in the instance that you do need to download, do it while you're connected locally via an Ethernet connection. It's much faster, much quicker. It's certainly not something you want to do over serial at 9600 or even at 115, 200 kilobits per second, because it will take its time. You certainly don't want to be doing it over any sort of radio network, because you'll really bring that radio network to its knees. So I strongly recommend, if you need to do a firmware update to the site, do it locally. Connect to it locally via Ethernet and just download it that way. Next, that's site source. So the site source is actually a zip file that STS creates, and it contains the site configuration, ladder application, and in this example, STS will create a zip file containing the site configuration, the ladder application, or the last created ladder application, and the PLC 1 to slave, and that's the site source. So STS will automatically create a zip file which we downloaded to the RTU and stored on that RTU, and that site source can be uploaded. It's quite a handy little feature to have. Next we have our settings. So we can change the site ID on the site if you wanted to. So if someone was deploying a new site and you knew what the site ID was, or you're connected to a brand new CPU and you want to put in a new site ID, you could do it from here easily. Okay, you can update the new site ID. Leave system addresses is always 0 for this example. Ladder application settings, we can load and reset or load only. So load and reset would suggest that it loads at the completion of the load, it would actually restart the application. You might not want to choose that setting because there might be something critical happening on site. Effectively what you're doing is stopping the application and restarting it, and it could cause issues on the site. Load only would mean it would just load it and with the updated application. My preference would always be to load it and reset, but obviously you need to be very careful when you do that. You need to take a bit of care. There's a lot of safety issues around doing something like that, so before you proceed with a load and reset, make sure that you've got someone on site or you've got the necessary go ahead to do that. So yeah, definitely that's something to look out for. Next, we've got our remote system file. Again, not something you do remotely, always do it locally. The good thing is that in the event that the remote system file doesn't get downloaded completely, or there's an issue with it, it will reset itself and it will return back to the last known working system file. So there is a copy of the or an image of the last known working system file on the device, and of course the site source. What settings are available there? Oh, that just lists the files that we're adding to the zip file, and of course there is also the opportunity to add user files in there, like CSV files, and then other bits and pieces like that, or driver specific files and things. So that's also in there. Next, we've got under here we've got settings. So we've got let system decide when reset, or we don't reset after download, or reset after total download. The default setting, let system decide when reset. Leave it at that. But the options are there. So don't reset after a download. So basically, download goes through, but the system doesn't reset. Reset after total download. Basically, you make even a minor change to the configuration or application or something like that, the unit will reset, will reboot. Generally, we let the system decide when to reset. Next, we have these options. We have don't erase flash before download, erase all flash before download, and erase flash, preserve site config. These two choices here I would use with a lot of care. You've got to be very careful when you select these ones here, because you certainly don't want to be erasing all flash before download, because obviously you're going to lose connectivity to the device, especially if it's remote. And the same applies with this one here, erase flash, preserve site config. You need to be very careful. They're quite advanced, these sort of things. You need to put a bit of thought into it before you download, and use these two settings. Just leave don't erase flash before download. So that's that setting there. Upload, again, very self-explanatory. Local or remote, okay. And there you have it. So you've got a site source and a site configuration which already exists. So we won't bother uploading that. That's fine. Next, we've got a hardware test. Hardware test is quite a handy utility. Again, you can do this locally or remotely. Select read. So it's actually reading the RTU, and it gives us what state the CPU is in. There are our CPU parameters here. So push the state, push button 1, push button 2 on the front of the CPU in. Plug in 1, plug in 2, 12 volt on. RAM size, battery backed up RAM size, available memories. What else we got? If it's security enabled, the serial 1, serial 2, plug in 1, plug in 2 statuses, Ethernet 1 port status, all this sort of information. The LED status, it lets us know what the LEDs are doing. We can actually refresh this, or we just enable LEDs. Well, LEDs are enabled by default. We can even test LEDs. Yeah, so it's quite good. It's quite a good feature. And you can see you can test. You can test the different LED colors. So the LEDs, they're multicolored LEDs, multifunction LEDs. So LEDs on, green LEDs, red LEDs, restore LED state. That's fine. We can go to the page, and we can look at what LEDs are currently on the CPU. So we've got our power on, our application light, our configuration light, and because we're connected to serial 2 and we're talking, it was receiving data at that time. Next, we have a power supply tab we can look at, and it gives us what state the power supply is in. So if we go auxiliary 1A state is on, all on here, and what are the operations? We can actually power them off if we wanted to, but it won't let us do. We actually have to do something called freeze the module before we can perform any of that. And we go here on the power supply test, and we can freeze power supply, and then it will allow us to perform these operations. So if we want to power off auxiliary 1 state, or if we want to, what's handy with this is a handy feature actually. So if you've got a device plugged into auxiliary 2A or 2B, you actually reset it by turning it off and turning it back on, which is quite handy. We'll leave that on for the moment. Next we have our some more power supply ROM data and other associated information. So here where power supply type is the AC was charger, battery charge level, battery capacity 6.5, we've said that, motherboard voltage, internal temperatures, external temperatures, which is external temperature is very important to when you're charging the battery. You must have a thermistor fitted. There is a thermistor which usually comes supplied with the power supply, and it must be fitted if you're going to have a battery backup. So the power supply knows what the ambient temperature is and can control the applied charge voltage for managing the battery capacity and charge. So that's pretty much it there. So that's pretty much it. So of course we were attempting to close down this application, but it's warning us restore application IO module state. So you stopped an application and it'll freeze an IO module. You can run it, so we'll just run and close. So basically it's a bit of a warning saying, hey, you've actually frozen that module, you've stopped that application. There is a timer running, so it will restart, but it's giving us the option to run and close. So we just want to run and close. There we go. So we're back to this screen. So that pretty much covers what I call the essentials of STS. So we've gone from the introductory to the essentials of STS. I'm hoping that these will be covered into more detail at a later date. So we've looked at field view. We've done the upload new site, download all sites is interesting. It gives us the option to download various files. We select the files we want to download. So let's say, for example, the site configuration. We've updated the site configuration of these sites. We can download to all these sites simultaneously. If we want to download a network configuration, which we'll go into very soon, into a bit of detail, probably in the next video, we'll cover the basics of MDLC or Motorola MOSCAD networking. We'll go into that. But this is quite a handy feature as well. So download all sites. Again, you need to exercise a fair bit of care. You need to know what you're doing when you're using these features, some of these features, because they can be quite disruptive and destructive, I suppose. So that concludes, like I said, our introduction into STS. We'll start getting into the bit of the nitty-gritty very soon. Thanks for watching. Any comments, any suggestions, please feel free to email me. I'll really welcome any input, anything you'd like me to cover, anything you'd like me to explain, go over, whatever. More than happy to have a listen and have a read of your suggestions and look forward to them, of course. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you soon. Thank you.